messaging that I got was, you've looked at yourself as broken and damaged your entire life. You're not. A lot of things happen to you. You've been taking them like they happened to you. They actually happened for you.
Welcome to Collective Guidance. I'm your host, Charla Goodnight, and today's conversation is one that I have genuinely been looking forward to. We talk a lot on this show about the journey inward, the moment you stop performing in a life and you actually start living one. And most of the time, we assume that journey looks a certain way, that it comes from a certain kind of person, right? But today's guest is going to challenge that assumption in the best possible way. Steve Sapourn spent nearly 3 decades in the world of high finance. I only spent 1. Okay. And he lasted 3 decades. Hedge funds, quantitative trading, private capital, overseeing hundreds of millions of dollars in investments. On paper, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And then something cracked open. And instead of ignoring it the way that many of us do, we just put it to the side and we don't focus on it. And we keep living a life that we're not necessarily loving. Steve walked towards it. He is now the host of the Neuro's Journey podcast, dedicated to nervous system healing, trauma recovery, and psychedelic-assisted therapy. He is a father of 2, his son Apollo and his daughter Athena. This is very interesting. And I have to say, a man who names his children after Greek gods and then spends his life learning how to actually feel things, that tells you everything about this man and who he is becoming. Steve, welcome to Collective Guidance. I'm so glad you're here with me.
Thank you so much. And what an introduction. I really appreciate it. And I am Greek. So Athena is a very common name. It's every third girl's name at church when I was growing up. But yeah, I'm keeping that heritage to the ability that I can. I'm second generation now.
Oh, that's beautiful. Were your parents, did they?
All 4 of my grandparents were born in Greece, and my parents were born here. Very poor and in the Depression times. And I'm kind of the first generation. My brother and I are the first in the family to go to college and those kinds of things. And, I really got a lot of Greekness growing up. I mean, if you've seen a Big Fat Greek Wedding, that was us minus the columns. And I rejected it a little bit because I was a rebel. But now as an adult, I try to keep the heritage going a little bit. I feel like it binds us to something larger than us.
Yeah, it does. Definitely. Before we go any further, if anyone is new here or if this conversation is already speaking to you, please hit the subscribe button right now, wherever you're listening. We have this kind of deep, real science meets soul conversation every week. And I'd love for you to be a part of it. Steve, you said you're the first that went to college in your family. Your parents didn't. And then after college, you spent about 25 years in a world of hedge funds and quantitative trading. That industry selects people who are analytical, controlled, and emotionally contained. I was a financial advisor for 1 year before 9/11 happened. And then the markets are so versatile. You're not supposed to feel, you're supposed to be analytical. When you look back at that version of yourself, who do you see in that?
Well, it was definitely a pattern. I was very conditioned not to feel, just being a boy in America and the experiences that I had. And I really had to, because I had deep childhood trauma experiences, which really set my nervous system up in a certain way. And I didn't know that at the time, but I had a sense that there was something just wrong with me and that I needed to manage it. I knew I was talented and I could do some things, but to your point of controlling emotions, one, I didn't go and work for the big banks. I started my own thing so that I could be in control of my environment. And I created trading systems specifically about doing all the work outside of the market hours so that I had rules. And oftentimes the rules of those systems are getting you to buy and sell at times that are uncomfortable for you. That's why they work, because you're going against the trend. So it's funny that you mentioned it. Like in life, I'd been very dedicated to subverting my feelings up until that point, and I created a whole investment strategy around that. And I'll tell you one thing that is interesting. I have a buddy of mine who's a very big investor in private equity funds, which invest in, early stage companies. And we both have this significant history of childhood trauma. And this fund that he really loves, they're very data oriented. They have like 300 pieces of data on every company. And they looked at all these pieces of data. And what do you think is the number one indicator of a founder led company being successful? If you had to pick one piece of
probably substantial childhood trauma.
Absolutely.
But not just your mom like knocking you around or throwing a shoe at you. You know what I mean?
I don't think we want to minimize those things either.
We don't. Yeah. But we grew up, like, let's face it. I'm 48, almost 49. We grew up in an era where our parents let us do whatever the hell we wanted. They weren't necessarily paying attention to us, and we would get a spank every now and then, like if I lied to my dad, it was, a spank. But I would say more substantial trauma where it really affected them.
Yeah, I mean, that is the data point. It's a really bad indicator of whether you actually become a founder of those companies, because almost all people with heavy addiction have substantial trauma. The stats are 2/3 of us are going to end up drug addicts or something, less productive. I was both. I was a drug addict and an entrepreneur. There is something about the environment that I grew up in that was probably positive. I knew I could be in uncertain and threatening environments over a long period of time. And that's what entrepreneur is a lot of the time, right? You're starting off something new. You will see, and I think you see it in some of our richest leaders and how they act and all of that they're playing out a lot of their trauma, right? Because what you start to realize, and what I have seen so much in the finance people that I know and friends, that you're orienting around this goal, right? I had a lot going on in my actual physical somatic body that I just did not want to deal with. And I didn't even know that I had trauma or what it was then. And you're like, okay, I'm going to get the beautiful wife, the house, the kids, all the things. And then you get that. And what happened for me is I achieved these goals that I was setting for myself when I was 60. I had them when I was 29. So all of a sudden, I'm facing actually this difficult situation of achieving my goals, because they didn't do anything to the actual work that I needed to do to go inside. I became more depressed and more addicted upon achieving those goals. Some people go another way and just say, oh, I've got 5 million, I need 10, I need 50. They think there's some number above. I just hit it where I realized money isn't doing this thing for me. Talk to some people who are kind of fearful that if they've had our experiences and they've been successful and they do the kind of work that we're going to talk about, that they might lose their edge. But actually, what I've found is I maintain my ability to do what I needed to do, and the kind of focus and narrowing a lot of things out. I maintain that. I just control when I have access to it. And before, I was not in control of how I operated in my nervous system. It made for a life that was filled with addiction and a lot of difficulties and a lot of regrets and a lot of things I should have been saying sorry about.
What was the one experience that changed everything, or the conversation that made you jump off the building of life and go into a radical shift?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I would say it was a process, and there's a few experiences in it. I was getting divorced from the mother of my children, and it was a very dramatic kind of divorce, and there was rehabs and all these kinds of things going on. And I joined a men's group then, and I'm not really a joiner. I just did it because my life was falling apart, and I just said, I got to change something. And the process of being with those men, I'm still with them. It's 10 years later, weekly meetings. And I really learned so many things about it and got on a path of what my purpose in life was, not to externally achieve, but was to learn as much about myself as possible and actually achieve my path, whatever that was. And it was a slow going. And about 5 years ago, I learned like what trauma was. It's basically overwhelming experiences that change the actual function of your brain. At that point, I started to say, okay, this is no longer like that I'm a bad person, like a damaged unit. When you have some of the experiences I had, which is long-term sexual abuse, which is witnessing a lot of domestic violence, witnessing a mass murder, you internalize those kind of things. And, I thought that I was a bad person deep down inside for a really long time. And to reframe trauma as an injury, it's really an adaptation. But seeing my brain on a scan and them saying, oh, well, these are the characteristics of someone that has had trauma. These people didn't know my life history. I mean, they named all of these behavior patterns like they're living in my house with me. You sleep, hyperarousal, anxious, blowing up, all these things. And it was more of a matter of fact kind of doctor's appointment where the guy said, well, with neurofeedback, which is what we do, we can move your brain in the direction of health. And so I started orienting around that. And really, I think the major shift where everything happened was in the pit of a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert. And not where most people
you gotta love that. I mean, that will take care of it. You had a revelation
not
and
where
a
most people
complete
get their
healing.
spiritual awakenings, but it's what happened to me. And I'd been doing, psychedelics as medicine then. And I had done a big journey before because I was really going through some things. And I just went to this concert, and I had quit drinking for the 100th time. And I said, I'll be the designated driver. I'll take a really tiny amount of mushrooms, just enough to kind of feel it. And what happened was, I think for the first time in my life, I just got a download. My higher wisdom, my intuition self spoke to me. And I was literally, I mean, people are mosh pitting around me. I'm just crying, like tears of joy. And the messaging that I got was, you've looked at yourself as broken and damaged your entire life. You're not. A lot of things happen to you. You've been taking them like they happened to you. They actually happened for you. If you listen to this voice, and it literally asked me to say, listen to the difference in the way that I talk to you and the way all the other voices that you actually pay attention talk to you. I'm not begging you. I'm a calm and wise voice. And if you listen to this, your life will start to change. And I had listened to the scared voices most of my life because I'm trying to control things. When you've had a lot of trauma, you like to think that you can control things. You really can't. And from that day, I was blessed to get COVID at the pit. And so with psychedelics, one of the things that you really want to do is integrate. And a lot of people talk about it, but very few people actually do it. And because of that, I had 2 weeks in bed where I just wrote and listened. And from that day, I started just, when I had an inclination of health, something was good for me, I just did it. I didn't think about it. I didn't overanalyze it. I was the type of guy before that if I was going to buy a TV, I'd make a spreadsheet about it, right? Like now, if I heard that voice say, hey, do that thing, I just did it. And since that day, which is about 4 years ago, I haven't had a drink since then. I haven't been using any, bad drugs. I've lost a bunch of weight. Everything in my life has really improved. And what sort of got me to doing the Neuro's journey is, even throughout that whole process, I had what I called an addict's body, which was what was happening for me on a daily basis. My entire life was sort of a building sensation, right? So in the morning at 10 o'clock, I wasn't like, I'm going to be a drug addict today. I was,
Right. Yeah.
and then so all of a sudden I'd be negotiating with myself at 4, and then at
Yeah.
6 I would know I was going to use, and then I would just do it. And even when I was healing and all that, I just learned how to take that dynamic and make it healthier, right? Yoga instead of crack, this kind of thing. But
Right.
I had it. At the core, I felt damaged. A little over a year ago, I woke up and there was just something different about my physical somatic
Mm-hmm.
experience. I didn't trust it at first, but I started noticing over a 2-week period, wow, I didn't reach for anything today. I wasn't doing hard drugs, but I'd have a weed gummy or
Right.
scrolling or
Right. Yeah.
something. And I was just, wow, I didn't even think about it. It wasn't that I used some willpower, I didn't think about it. And I mean, honestly, Charlotte, I felt so blessed to have that happen to me because I always thought that there was something wrong with me. And that I just had the realization that there's probably millions of people that have had these experiences that have been
Mm-hmm.
telling themselves that they're the problem for so long. And through brute force and being blessed with having money and doing all kinds of things, I calmed the nervous system down that was extremely fired up. And I quit my finance career within 2 weeks of that day and just said, I'm going to do something in this world. And so I got the idea for the Neuro's Journey, which really was intended originally to talk about the healing journey of trauma. And it still is. It's a very important part of my life. But what I think that I thought was I would just be Steve without trauma if these sensations went away. But what happened is everything in my life completely shifted
Right.
because I was losing so much of this wasted energy of a nervous system that was not reacting to reality. It was reacting to things that happened to me when I was 4 and 5. And I gained all that energy and I gained a purpose. My purpose before was really honestly, don't be an asshole to the people in my vicinity. I mean, because with a fired up nervous system, you can lash out, right?
Yeah.
And your kids and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt all these things were like they were just me and I had to manage me. And so really where the work is going now is talking more about what an experience is that you can live when you have this wider zone of tolerance for sensation, and how your life opens up in so many positive ways that it's just been a blessing. And I just wish it for so many people. I know that I felt so wrong inside for so long, and it was there wasn't truth to that. And there's people that are wasting their lives on that notion that is not true.
Yeah. And Steve, I think, what really attracted me to your work and to you is number one, you're a man talking about this. And I firmly believe, and I've been saying this for years, that there is a male crisis going on. I was saying that there was going to be a male crisis back in 2016 when my son said to me, why is everything focused to women?
Mm.
And being a woman, like I get it, like I know where our journey has been, but also I know that there is a male crisis going on of record rates of isolation, addiction, suicide. I have a dear friend that took his life, and you lived inside of a world that breeds men like this for exactly that kind of emotional shutdown from the inside. What does that actually look like? And what's happening beneath the surface that no one is talking about? And most importantly, how do we get back on track with that?
Mm. Well, thank you so much for bringing up this topic. It's really important to me, and I'm sorry about your friend. It is true that there is a crisis here, and the way that you framed it, I think that you tread a little boundary between, well, I don't want to make it like, like you're also talking about women to make sure that they're not kind of offended that
They're
men
not
who have the
suppressed.
patriarchy,
Right.
and all that stuff. But, as I thought about this, um, I think there's a real opportunity for men and women to come together on this topic. And when I heard the word patriarchy at first, especially when my nervous system wasn't calmed down, I just honestly felt attacked because, I certainly wasn't the best dude ever, but I also wasn't a predator. And I felt like, oh my God, I got to be responsible for all this. But
hold on, Steve,
yep.
I laugh because whenever I heard the word patriarchy, I was like, what the hell are they talking about?
Right.
No one's ever fucking controlled me.
Yeah, you don't seem like
I am not fucking controlled by anyone.
Historically, there have been a lot of atrocities done to women, but when I really think about it, the patriarchy is not a system that men generally created to advantage themselves. It's like we're seeing now in the Epstein's file. There's a small group of people that were exploiting men too. And the patriarchy, what it really did to men was tell us that we can't have our feelings. We can't be authentic. We can't tell you, Charla, that I'm feeling down or I'm feeling like this. So I got to hide myself from you. And what was the benefit of that? Well, it gave the owners of things compliant workers, right? A man has been taught for generations not to talk about his feelings and just suffer through it and be stoic is a good worker on a factory floor to get exploited. And he's a good person to be in the military to literally go out and have slaughtered. And so I really feel like what's happened, and I think men also have to be accountable. And we have done a lot of harsh stuff to women. So I think that we can say, if we're honest enough to say, hey, look, I own it, maybe not, these are my responsibilities. These are just what men have done. Like, this is wrong. And we're all part of this system. And men are your brothers and your husbands and your cousins, and we're all in this together. So I really think that there's a lot of that. And, for me, I'll give you an example of where like the patriarchy and, just the conditioning of men, how early it happens. When I was 6 years old, the first time I ever went to spend the night at a friend's house, this is 1975. I'm a little older than you. They would leave a 6-year-old in a car then for a little bit. And my sister went into 7-Eleven. We live outside of Washington, D.C. And a man came up the street and I witnessed a mass murder. And he was shooting people and he literally pointed a gun right at me. He met my eyes and he turned around and he killed a mother and a daughter, and another person was killed in front of me. And as an aside, as I was doing research about my life for this project, there wasn't a mass murder in America like every day in 1975. It was called the Wheaton Massacre. It was all over the papers. But the point I'm making about the way that kids are programmed is, so I'm in the car alone. Things calm down. My sister's running out. She's walking me back to 7-Eleven. I'm 6 years old. And what's running through my mind is do not cry. Do not go in that store and cry. Do not cry. I mean, that's just what I was telling myself. And no one had ever told me those things. But, when you train generations of men not to do the things that make relationships real, right? A relationship between you and I is about us being authentic together and being able to surface our feelings. And we are programmed as little kids by men and women not to do the things that allow us to have successful relationships. And you said you have boys, right? I don't know if you see the difference. I saw a difference between the way my boy acted at 3, 4, and 5 than when he did at 13, 14, and 15. More closed down, more of this programming in.
Yeah.
And so I just think like what's been happening politically and all of this stuff is they're trying to get us to fight down here and not look at what's going on upstairs. And so, as far as a responsibility, I think there's just an opportunity to rethink what masculinity is. So for me, the way I orient around it now is, I call it neuro leadership, that I want to take control of my own nervous system, my reactivity, how I am, as the first and most important thing, not because I'm selfish, but because my, especially as a leader, as a business person, as a father, as a partner, my nervous system has a weather system, right? Like you can feel it when I walk in a house. If I'm calm and ready to receive, then you calm down. And all the people around us do. And so to me, what I feel like is the goal of masculinity is to do the hard work to do that. And honestly, from my personal experience, I had a sexual abuser for a long time who told me he was going to kill me if I spoke, told me he was going to kill my parents if I didn't keep coming and seeing him. I stuttered for decades. I had a lot going on. So to just say, I'm going to make my nervous system a priority, you can give your man credit for that. I mean, that's courage. And, it was only like love for myself, but also love for the people around me that I engaged in that. But I think now that we see this really kind of just terrible version of masculinity on the news so much, and it's let's dominate people, let's extract from them, which stresses you out. And really, I think a real man, he doesn't start fights, he stops them, right? He's got his power, he can provide, but it's an uplifting power. So his wife or kids or whatever, they feel safe, they're more willing to take risks, they're more willing to be themselves. And so I just think that, to me, that's an inspirational new way to go. And it really comes down to men trying to unlearn their decades of being programmed. And I know that you mentioned, that, there's big T trauma and little T trauma, and that's really true. But the way that I look at it is, you and I, we come out with this light, right? We're perfect beings. And it's getting obscured. So in my kind of traumas, let's just say a fucking spray paint just came after it, right? And it got covered. But somebody who's living in a house where their parents only love them if they perform, or they're getting little drips of paint on that light and it's covering it up, and it's still the same thing happens. And I just believe all of our goal is to figure out what those particular drips of paint, the covering, are for us. Yours are different than mine, and go into that and shine our light. And I think that men and women cannot be at odds about that. I think that, I know that when you engage in that and you tell your family, you get a lot more grace. They're willing to work with you if you're trying, especially if you're like, look at these things, like, look, my nervous system is tuned to threat. And when it gets a little too hyped up, what I do is lash out. And I'm not at this moment in control of that. So what I am in control of is tomorrow morning, I can tell you I didn't act the way that I wanted to act, and I'm sorry. And I'm working on it. And then one time you don't blow up. And then, and then you start to get this thing. So I think that there's just such an opportunity, instead of to be pit against each other, for us to be together.
Yeah. So let's switch a little bit to psychedelics. We touched on it a little bit. I have definitely had my experience with psychedelics for healing purposes. I found a lot of healing that came from it. You talk about it, though, for trauma and PTSD. And you're speaking from experience. What type of psychedelics really assist with trauma? And most importantly, after you do them, what is an integration process like?
Yeah, so I think for people who don't know the science of it, to just step back a little bit, psychedelics were basically made illegal in 1970. And at the time, they were the most studied medicine of all medicines in history. The more tests about them. And there was a cover of Time magazine in the 60s, like, is LSD going to save the world, kind of thing. And then, the counterculture came up and the man kind of put it down. That science has come back in the past 20 years or so. And it's incontrovertible that psychedelics are of benefit to a lot of different things. And so PTSD for me personally, and I've done a lot of different ones, but I think the go-to move when you're dealing, my PTSD one was really oriented around my sexual abuse, and so that was MDMA. And
Okay.
MDMA is a psychedelic that, and it's not a traditional one like LSD or mushrooms, but it's lumped in there. But it floods your brain with your love sort of chemicals, right? So it's really hard. One, if you've never done it before, kind of impossible in a setting where someone knows what's going on for it to be bad. I mean, every sense of your loving stuff is being flooded. So you feel safe and comfortable. And it was originally developed for couples therapy, and it's still used for that. But for me, what I was able to do was one, just process trauma, literally like my body flopping around and stuff like The Exorcist, just like it, because trauma is actually physically in your body. And so I had a very experienced therapist with 30 years of knowing about it. And she's not really moving me in some direction. She calls it witnessing. So she's there to just ask a question or encourage a behavior. And I would go underneath eye shades and listen to music. And like, I would just have physical release of trauma, like incredibly sweating. I mean, it was out of control. And then I would sort of it would calm down a little bit. And she would say, well, why don't you take the eye shades off? Let's talk a little bit. And the way that I know my abuser, I don't know his name. As a little kid, this started happening to me when I was 5. I just know him as the bad man. So that the bad man's hurting me, the bad man's this, the bad man's that. So I told her, I was like, I'm really getting this notion that I want to just say I love you to the bad man, and which has never would have occurred to me before that moment. And she was like, I think you should go with that. What do you think? And I told her, I was like, when I was under there and I'm flopping around, what I sort of saw was, how people say before you die, you get a life review. I
I've
felt
had a
like
near-death experience, Steve. You
oh, you did?
definitely get a life review and you get to see everything that you did and how you showed up. And yeah.
You have a lot going on. I want to be your friend, Charlotte.
We definitely will. I've stayed
Okay.
connected to everyone that has come on the podcast because I don't believe in coincidences. I believe we are part of the collective, and you are giving such amazing guidance right now. So continue on. So you were having a life review.
Yeah, but the interesting thing in that moment is I didn't have a life review of me. I had a life review sort of him. And I could just see his abuse. And I could just see a life of abuse. And my nervous system wasn't turned outward, except sometimes just being kind of a dick, but I was never a predator or whatever. But I pointed a lot of violence at myself, and I made a lot of bad choices. And so I understood the dynamic of being out of control. And so I just decided that he was too weak to control it, still his responsibility, but that I was going to, as a human being, just love him and forgive him. And now that was a very important part of the process. It's not all of the process. Outside of psychedelics, I did a lot of hypnosis to kind of expel him from me. And that wasn't so lovey-dovey. That was like get him out of my psyche. But to your point of psychedelics, what they do is I think they surface your inner wisdom. They create what they call a critical period of neuroplasticity. So we all know our brain is neuroplastic, right? We can change. Well,
Okay, wait.
psychedelics.
Some people don't know about neuroplastic. Can you just tell
Okay.
them real fast?
Yeah, neuroplastic is just the ability for your brain to literally change and develop new connections. So let's say you had a lane of addiction. That's a very well trodden neural pathway, right? I do coke, I do this, I do that. Well, you can put new inputs in and start to develop a new neural pathway that becomes stronger than that one, and you no longer are a coke addict, right?
Right.
Now, it's very difficult because those drugs, like cocaine, is also very neuroplastic, but in one direction. Do more cocaine. cocaine for breakfast, cocaine. Yeah. Psychedelics, what they do is essentially you have realizations about yourself and they create a situation in your brain that you can create new pathways. And the one way that I like it to be explained is, imagine you're at a ski resort and there's ski slopes. And then all of a sudden you get a ton of new snow and everything is covered up. You can go in any direction then, right? You don't have to go down the well-trodden path. So integration, what's important about it is you learn something in your experience, and especially if it's something like, I really need to meditate more, or I really need to be healthier, some behavior change. What you want to do is start doing that immediately, because each of the psychedelics has this window of time where your brain is really open to it, and they're different depending how long it is and all that. You can research it, but let's say with mushrooms, 5 to 7 days. So if I got something that said, what I need in my life is a meditation practice, I've said I was going to do it, but I'm just not doing it, then in that 5 to 7 days you meditate, and you'll basically get the benefits of like doing it for 30 days straight or 60 days, and you can create a new neural pathways. So to me, what is brilliant about psychedelics in a well-held container with somebody who understands what's going on is you are going to get your inner wisdom, and that's the true north. I mean, what you should be worried about what Charla thinks, right? Not what someone else thinks. That's the and I don't sense you have a lot of issues with that, but for other people. But when our intuition is our guidepost, that's when we're really free, and that surfaces, and then it gives you an opportunity to start to execute on that. So I'm not the kind of person that says it's for everybody, but if somebody is out there and you're thinking about it and you're hearing about it and you're starting to like have that little click, maybe that's the reason why you're on this podcast now. The science is clear. Just research it. It's clear for a lot of different things: for addiction, for PTSD, for general wellness, for brain health. You also want to find people who are, have had experience doing it, right? Traditionally, in a native culture, you're learning how to be a psychedelic guide for 7, 10 years, decades. Now people are doing it out of the back of Rolling Stone or whatever. So, I mean, there is some nuance here to be a guide, but it's available. Like in my state, in Colorado, where I live, psychedelics are legal for therapeutic use. You can buy them. You can have a therapy. So, if people want to DM me if they have questions, I'm open to sharing the information I have. But they have been very important parts of the process. And really what they've helped me with is I would say that I do them once or twice a year for therapeutics. And I also do them for pleasure. I mean, pleasure is part of life, Charlotte. Pleasure is
No,
so
I
do them for
totally,
fun occasionally.
yeah. I've definitely done a little bit of mushrooms for
Yeah.
fun, not too often though. Yeah, the therapeutic benefits of them though are incredible. It's incredible to help you get out of the loop and get back into what is real. And what is real is that we are a soul having a human experience, and we can create whatever we want when we are in connection with source. And psychedelics reminds us of how open the world really is and how we can change the neuro pathways, but we could go all day, but I want to talk about your kids real fast because
Okay.
because as a mother and as a mother of a son, or three sons actually, I think that there is something so important as parents of our job. And you have a daughter who is now starting school and business, and she's stepping into the same world that you're walking away from in some ways. And what do you want her to know about the world that took you decades to learn?
Well, it's interesting. So Her name is Athena. She's a sophomore here at CU. She did start in business. She actually has switched and she wants to be a child psychologist, which
Okay.
is a lot more aligned with her path. And it was interesting, I mean, I think she wanted to get into the school because the business school was the hardest one to get into, and she was a really good student. And she's always loved kids. She's always wanted that. And it's really what she wants to be as a mom. I mean, at the base of it, for ever since she was a little kid. What was interesting is I asked her, I was like, I think this is a great move. You would be great at this. You're magic with kids. It's very needed. And I asked her, why did you go for the business? And she's like, well, I just sort of felt like I needed to. I come from an entrepreneurial family. So even though I didn't feel like maybe I was putting some sort of pressure on her, there was something steering her away from her path. Luckily, she steered herself back relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And, what I would say is, to your point about spirituality, spirituality is a really important part of life. And I really highly recommend a book called The Awakened Brain by Dr. Lisa Miller. If you know
Yes,
that book,
I
yeah.
have that. I
Yeah.
have that. I believe that she was a nun.
I don't remember that in the book, but what I
I
do
I don't
remember.
think I don't think that she mentioned it in the book,
Mm-mm.
but I ended up meeting her.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I want to
Yeah.
have her on the podcast. And so what's interesting about her research is she basically found, she looked at it as two types of brain. She called it the achievement brain and the awakened brain. And I think she was brought into a study where they were studying the teenagers in very affluent suburbs, right? And they wanted a control group, and they studied teenagers in kind of the hood or whatever, in less socioeconomically good environments. And they were expecting more anxiety and depression and all that in the challenging environments. But what they actually found was they found more anxiety, more depression in the more wealthy neighborhoods. And what she came to was she figured out the correlation between whether people self-report that on the scale, whatever the scale is, if you're the highest level of that, spirituality is important to me. Doesn't have to be a religion, doesn't have to be a particular thing, but like I'm a 5 out of 5 on spirituality. If you say that when you're 16, when you're 26, 10 years later, you have a 75% reduction in anxiety and depression. Way better than any medicine. And then if you come from a family like mine where you're predisposed to it, it's a 90% reduction. It's insane. And then what she also did, so after they got that news, she studied those people who reported that, and literally their brain function is open to more things. So I know what that's like because I had that narrow, if you want to call it achievement, I call it like I'm focused because I'm coming from a place of lack. And I need money, I need this, I need something to soothe something in me. I'm narrowing my focus, and I might be good at getting something, but what I've experienced is a much deeper spirituality, what I perceive to be a much more open brain, and it's made me more creative, more interesting, a wider experience of life. And so, what I would encourage all people to do is really think about yourself and your life. Like, we're dealing with a system, right? We have a nervous system, we have a brain, we have psychology. And what I found is all these things are like separated, and everybody's in their little lane, and nobody's telling you, well, you got to work with the whole thing. And I don't know, have you ever been in couples therapy before? Ever done that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm divorced.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in couples therapy. I'm actually going to a whole family therapy pretty soon.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you my
With the
experience in.
ex-wife, or with his new wife, me, ex-wife, him, and the 3 kids.
Wow, that's going to be quite. I mean, and I've done a lot of that, and honestly, like I couldn't really operate in those situations as well as I would have liked because of my experience. my nervous system was tuned up towards threat. And, in a couples therapy situation, I would often have the person say, look, well, what I want you to do is just like sit and listen to her fully say her thing. Like, don't defend, don't do this, don't do that. And I, once I got a little experience with it, I would say something like, I mean, I agree to this. This is a very reasonable ask. I just don't know if I can do it in the heat of battle. And
Valid.
nobody ever really said to me, and so what would happen is the situation would come up, she would be saying something, I start deflecting, I start blaming her, I start blowing up, whatever it is, because my nervous system is dysregulated. And then it feeds this whole loop. Well, I'm a bad person, I can't do this, I'm this. And what nobody ever said to me is like, look at your history. Your brain is functioning in a certain way where that's almost physiologically impossible for you. So what you need to do is like work on calming yourself down, work on your nervous system a bit so that you can get there. And I think if my partner had realized, when you get to a certain heart rate and all these things, your brain just shuts down, and it's worse for a man. And, if my partner knew what was happening and could say, oh, okay, Steve's not really in control of it. And then slowly what happened is I learned the ability to say, I'm sorry, which was honestly really difficult for me before.
It's so difficult.
Because
for men to say sorry.
Because I felt like it was an attack on me and that it was really saying I'm a bad person. And as I started to shift my whole dynamic where I was like, well, the kind of man I'm going to be is this. I'm going to deal with this and I'm going to serve my people. And what I'm going to, and so then when I would do those things, not in that moment, but the next morning, I could go and say, Charlie, look, I'm sorry. Like I did this thing. That's not the kind of man that I want to be. I didn't feel in control of it. And I didn't feel that was attacking me. And then eventually, now I can just hear what you have to say and I don't have to say I'm sorry the next morning. Right. But I mean, there's again another way where we could be on the same team. And it's been amazing to me that like through all these years and all these therapies, not one person ever said to me, why don't we look at how your brain functions? Yeah. I had to hear it on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then I did it, and that was changing to me, like we talked about. So what I really think that my experience is, you don't have to be a neuroscientist. You can figure out the basics of your nervous system and your brain and your personal psychology and realize that talking with your therapist is beneficial in some ways, but it's not going to change the like nervous system stuff. So you need to like work on all of that and work in a framework that actually heals you and makes you just the person you want to be.
And I think if I'm mistaken, that's your whole purpose of the Neuro Journeys podcast, is to provide information for people to learn this on their own. Who really is that person that you're targeting?
It's interesting. I would say it's for all people, but what I have most experience with is men like me, who did the things on the outside and looked like they had the life and they achieved and they kind of did what they were told to do, right? We were told to provide. We were told to shut the fuck up and not show our feelings. We were told, so we did that. And then you get there and you realize, well, relationally, that's not work. And you feel empty. And so you've done all this thing and you're at this sort of point in your life. And why I feel like a call to serve that particular man now, especially is, he's probably like in my age, he's in his 50s. He's been successful. He probably has some resources. He might have employees. The leverage of helping that person not only helps his family, but his people if he decides to serve, which many people do after they go through this process. He's got the ability to do that. So that's what I'm focused on. That's my most personal experience. I do think everything that men need to do to be whole, also women need to do. So anybody can listen, but who I'm talking to is me, really, and the kind of person who it looks good on the outside, and you feel empty on the inside, and there's a way to switch out of that. And for me, it's just become so inspirational to not only feel that way about myself, but to know that I am positively impacting the people around me, like that they are seeing it. Like, yeah, I could leave Athena and Apollo a bunch of real estate, but if I left them with the notion that you can overcome the hardest things, you can move past incredible addiction, anxiety, depression, and you can have the tools for that, that's worth a million pieces of real estate, and that's available to anybody. And you can be a man in that way, and your wife can make more money than you because you can still hold that down, right? And so I just want to orient around that and let men and all people know that if you feel stuck, if you have behaviors that you regret and you think you can't stop, you can absolutely stop and you can change. And there's a process for doing it. And we talk about it every Wednesday on the Neuro's Journey. I hope to have you on at some point.
Yeah, I would love that. Hey, if the Neuro's Journey totally succeeds to everything you dreamed that it could be, what changes? Not for you personally, but for the world. What does it look like when more men do this work?
Well, that's an awesome question. You are good at this. Well, I would say that I believe that we are at a turning point for humanity. And I think we are, it's an interesting thing to be in my experience, because when I turn on the news, I see the most horrible things, and it seems like this is the worst point ever. When I interact with the people that I interact with, if I didn't see the news, I would think this is the most amazing point in human history. And I'm hoping that this version of masculinity that we're seeing now, which is dominating and extractive, is in its extinction burst phase. We're seeing the worst of it so it can recede. And so I would like to be a part of that change in humanity, really. I know it sounds like a big thing, but I think that I can communicate this to men. I can communicate it to men, particularly who, if they decide to move in a particular direction, they have a lot of leverage because they have assets and they have things. And I would love for my grandchildren or their grandchildren to look back and say, like, this is when really things shifted in a way that was more positive and more loving and more productive for all the people. And old Grandpa Steve was part of it. And so that's ideally what I would like to do. I just want to be a part of the cultural phenomenon of the world of change.
Well, and the name collective guidance, it is not on just one person. It is on us as a collective to guide and remind everyone what we already know within, that we are sovereign, that we are loved, that we are light, that we are able, that we are capable, and we can rely on each other to be that light, that your journey is like someone else's journey, and you can give them hope and remembrance that if you can do it, they can do it. So I love that you want to be part of that, and your life has brought you to that. Last question, and I want you to answer it from your gut, not your head. What's the bravest thing you've ever done?
What's the bravest thing I've ever done? I would say the sexual abuse thing, like it came to me in hypnosis. I had buried it for a really long time. So it was like all of a sudden I got it, and it was so intense. And I remember the first night that it happened. I mean, I literally, my kids, I'm divorced as well. My kids were gone. And I was laying in bed after just getting all these memories and the flopping around on the hypnotherapist table. And I literally checked the lock on the door of my bedroom 40 times that night as a 50-year-old man. And it just felt so overwhelming. And what was amazing about the psychedelic therapy was that it allowed me to kind of move through it a little bit. But I think that, and really just even the braveness of the notion of being like, I feel blessed that those things happen to me now. And I really do. And because I can empathize. If you say that to me, I can say, I know exactly what that's like, Charla, and it helps me to connect with people. So yeah, facing it and having the courage and the trust that really there's something greater than my little pain and that it's giving me something. And that's a very scary thing to do because we get contracted, right?
I mean, that is so brave, holding love for that person and some compassion, and also knowing that it's still wrong and not taking yourself as being the abuser anymore, and holding that pain onto you. That was so beautiful, Steve. Steve, this conversation has been everything I hoped it would be. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I am so honored that you guys contacted me, because what you're doing, stepping out in the world, and the world that's totally rewarded for staying closed, men for staying closed and choosing to open up anyway and to shine your light and be part of this movement that I think men so desperately need. We need healthy masculine leaders, and ones that can say, I don't always get it right. I fuck up too. But when I fuck up, I go back and I apologize and I correct my wrongs, because that's a human experience. We're not always going to get it right. I don't always get it right. I blow up on my kids sometimes, and then I got to come back and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the stages of womanhood. There's no excuses for it, but I apologize for my outbursts. I should not treat you that way. And I think it really just takes a lot of courage, and the fact that you're doing publicly, building something from nothing and letting your children watch you become a version of yourself that they have not known, and how to recreate yourself and heal yourself. That is so powerful for your son. And it is also a model for your daughter of the man that she is going to choose as a husband. So, to everyone listening, if this episode stirred something inside of you that just like, wow, this guy is really credible, which I think you're really incredible. Thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing. Follow his podcast. It is The Neuro's Journey, and you can find it on all outlets: Apple, Spotify, Amazon. He's on YouTube. They do a video version of it as well. And if your nervous system is trying to tell you something, listen to it. And if you're a woman listening to this, think about the man in your life and maybe just give him a little bit more compassion for where he is. A partner, a brother, a father, a son, an ex-husband. Give him a little bit of compassion. Share this episode with them. Don't give them a lecture. They don't want a fucking lecture. Trust me, you're not their mama, unless you are their mama, and that's different. But even then, they don't want a lecture. But, I am so grateful to have you here, Steve. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your vulnerability.
Thank you so much. I love this conversation, and yeah, I feel honored to be on here. You are really good at this. Your heart's in the right place. You're smart and fun, and I had an awesome time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really see what you're doing, and listening to all of your episodes. I mean, I did a lot of studying on you. So, it's fun. I think one of my favorite parts of doing this podcast so far is creeping on people.
Yeah, I agree. You really get to know people well, right? And they become your friends and allies forever. So I really believe in the hero's journey, and, we can be each other's allies here. And I would feel so great about that. I love what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys, my name is Charla Goodnight. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.